So out of courtesy for those maybe that are trying to watch it online, I'll get us started. I know everybody enjoys visiting with each other. But we've got a good agenda today, and we want to not take too much of your time, more than we have to. I want to call on the Miss Wanda Jaffe. She's the Deputy Director of the Professional Licensing Boards, and she has been gracious enough to allow us to meet here in her facility. So I'm going to invite her to come forward and give us a few words of welcome and maybe some logistics. Ms. Wanda, if you don't mind, because we're live streaming, all the presenters will need to present from here, and we've got Senate Press here that's going to help us with that, make sure we're on board. Am I on?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that mic on?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, the floor is yours.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Wanda Jaffe, as he stated. I'm the Deputy Director here at the Professional Licensing Boards. As many of you know, we have 43 boards, 197 license types, and we are in the process of trying to get Georgians licensed as quickly as possible. We're the only division that's located down in Macon, so welcome to Macon, everybody. And I just want to tell y'all thank you for coming down here, and I'm gracious to open up our building to you guys. We are transparent. We are doing the best that we can to get Georgians licensed as quickly as possible. We are fully involved with trying to remove blockers and get Georgians to work, so whatever we can do to be of help, just let us know.
Thank you, Wanda. And how many employees are here?
So I have a total of 110 employees here in Macon. That does include some of our investigators and inspectors that are here in Macon.
And you all are back open and the pandemic's been over quite a while. You're open for business. People are working here in their offices. Is that correct?
Well, yes and no. So we never closed during the pandemic. During the COVID pandemic, I was here every day, 5 days a week. We did send our staff home to do some remote working. So we're now doing kind of a partial remote, partial in person. So every board that works here, operates, has somebody here every day. So if a customer comes in and walks in off the street, if they have an occupational therapy license, there's someone here to help them. So what we did was kind of rotated our staff out. Some of them can work from home as long as somebody is here every day that can assist a client. I'm here Monday through Friday every day to make sure that if something comes up, that they've got somebody that they can talk to.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions for Wanda? Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
I also want to recognize Maggie Hasty with the Secretary of State's office. She's been instrumental in helping us put this together. Thank you, Maggie, very much for that. Again, Senate Press, thank you for the work. As far as the committee members, we have Senator Brian Strickland here, Senator Mike Dugan here. Senator Anna Vittardi is with us virtually, watching the meeting as it's live streamed. And if he has questions, he's going to text them to Kai and I. And then Senator Halpern had a prior commitment on the West Coast. So, but we do have a quorum, and with that, I will call the meeting to order. Also do want to recognize my legislative assistant, Kylene Gallagher. Thank you, Kai, for all your help with this. I'm going to make a couple of remarks to start off with. This topic, as I have dug into it, has been kicked around for literally decades. I suspect that my father worked on this issue. It's a tough nut to crack. There are, as Wanda said, under this office, 43 licensing boards, and they're not any of them one the same as the other, really. They all have different nuances to them, and everybody kind of has the turf issues and their agenda and their vested interests. So it's difficult politically it's a challenge. But we are in 2023. And as you'll hear from Daniela in a minute, we have serious workforce needs in Georgia. Thankfully, under Governor Kemp and prior good leadership, we've got a growing economy, and we've got to get into the modern world with this licensing, professional licensing issue if we're going to continue to grow our economy. I do want to recognize my very good friend, Representative Patty Bentley, for joining us, and we're always glad to see you, Patty. And Patty has recently gotten engaged, and I'm real proud for her, but I hope she doesn't decide to run for the Senate. I'd be in trouble. So our first speaker, just to give us some information on where we're at in Georgia with workforce, is Daniela Perry. So Daniela, the floor is yours, and if you'd like to sit and adjust that mic down, or if you want to move that chair and stand and just talk in the mic, you may can work your PowerPoint.
Thank you. Adjusted. Can y'all hear me okay? Well, Chairman Walker, again, thank you for the invitation to be here today and to share a little bit of information that we're looking at from a Georgia Chamber perspective. My name is Daniela Perry. I serve as the Vice President of the Georgia Chamber Foundation, and the foundation is really the research and data arm of the Georgia Chamber. So a lot of our work, focuses on these big trends and what we're looking at moving forward. So as Chairman Walker mentioned, we've experienced tremendous economic growth. The last 4 years, again, has been record economic growth year over year. And of course, Governor Kemp announced another year of record economic growth for FY23. So while many states are trying to still recover from the pandemic and find their footing, we have continued to see prosperity year over year. I think a key point to mention is the fact that 77% of this economic activity has occurred outside of Metro Atlanta, which as a state chamber is really important to us because we want to make sure that in every corner of the Peach State, whatever your zip code is, that you are experiencing opportunity and able to find good employment and grow your economy. So while we've experienced this tremendous economic growth, it hasn't come without its challenges, although these are really, really good problems to have. So we've been tracking unique job postings since 2020 with COVID. You'll see on the graph here, it looks at 2021, and you can see there's been some variation over the years. You'll see that dip in Q3 of 2021, which was the Delta variant of COVID, and you'll see it rebounded very quickly to over 450,000 job postings, and now we are kind of in a little bit of a plateau around 350,000. The top occupations we've seen this quarter are registered nurses, software developers, and retail salesperson. The other one that often ends up in this category is tractor-trailer truck drivers, which obviously with our freight and logistics infrastructure, it's a huge demand. Of course, too, I want to note that all of these are very different skill levels, require different education, but again, we're just seeing tremendous need across the state. Another key point to mention is the number of unemployed Georgians is about half of what these job postings are. So as we're thinking about how do we combat with our workforce shortages, simply getting people off of unemployment and into jobs is not going to fix our problem. We really need to think strategically about how we can, bring folks in, and then also think about folks that are not engaged in the workforce, make sure that we're able to get them back into the workforce, whatever barrier they might face, which is where I'd like to point you to our labor force participation rate, which is around 61.3%. So we have nearly 40% of Georgians that are not engaged in the workforce presently. They're of working age. So again, as we're thinking about how do we get these folks in, we want to make sure we're looking at any barriers that would prevent them to getting to employment, or maybe individuals that are also underemployed are looking at that. So I mentioned labor force participation rate because we like it a little bit better than unemployment because it looks at kind of that full working age population. This goes back to 2000, and you'll kind of see that there have been some spikes and jumps, and you can see where the Great Recession's been, as well as COVID. But overall, we've seen a decline in individuals that are participating in the workforce. I've got numbers for the last couple of years. We actually had our peak in November of 1998, around 69, a little over 69%. So again, as we're thinking about the fact that we've seen this decline overall, we want to make sure that we're thinking about what are those barriers, understanding that the nature of work has changed, the skills that are needed in the workforce are changing too, especially as we're seeing technology become a bigger part of everyone's job. So I pulled some occupations from our labor market software. These are all required licenses in the state. Included the job postings over the last year. I also included retiring soon. So as we're thinking about not only our current workforce shortages, but what's the need over the near term, want to be cognizant of that shortage that's coming, and then also the number of employers competing. So when we say war for talent, you'll know that we're not over-exaggerating. This is a tremendous need. Of course, I'd love to appoint you to registered nurses. We've got almost 3,000 employers that are trying to hire registered nurses in the state, and there have been more than 82,000 postings. Again, you'll also see that there are other health occupations for, nursing home, certified nursing assistants, home health aides, and tractor trailer truck drivers are the top ones, but of course, child care workers, pharmacists, accountants. And again, this ranges over different skill levels, different education levels, but tremendous growth in all of them. So we like to look at the long term and know where we're going. In the next 10 years, we're going to need, the number of jobs will increase by a little more than 2 million, and our population is going to increase by 1.2 million individuals. So again, as we're thinking about the fact that we are experiencing this tremendous growth, and this is kind of just that projection, we certainly could get larger announcements that'll bring more need. Also thinking about the fact that in the back rearview mirror, we've got all those retirements of people that are moving towards that. People are working longer, so there's a little bit of variability, but over the long term, we're really going to need to think strategically and systematically about how we do things differently, how we're able to innovate, whether it's reducing regulations, but making sure that we're able to meet our workforce needs long term. So we have, at the Georgia Chamber, have looked at a number of opportunities to improve occupational licensing to get more folks into these occupations, because generally occupations that are licensed have higher salaries, so better opportunities for folks. There's around 40% of Georgians that have a criminal history, and we've seen that salaries actually are 10 to 20% lower for individuals that have been incarcerated. And two, the unemployment rate is significantly higher for those that are formerly incarcerated as well. I know there was some legislation from Chairman Strickland last session that addressed this, and the Georgia Chamber was supportive of it because it really looks at how do we get folks that have skills and talents but are facing some logistical barriers within our occupational licensing system. Georgia also has a huge military population. We actually have the 9th biggest veteran population and then the 5th biggest active duty population in the state. But portability of licensing for military spouses has become more and more important for the Department of Defense. In order for them to designate Georgia as a military-friendly state, you need to have that 30-day near-term licensing. Of course, as we're looking statewide and seeing the big need, all of our military installations are huge economic drivers across the state. And so we know what they mean to the communities, but as well what they mean to the state as a whole. We want to certainly protect our military installations because we know the tremendous growth that they add, especially with Robins Air Force Base being just down the road here. The healthcare industry, as I've kind of shared some data, you'll see again there's tremendous need and growth. But the Georgia Healthcare Workforce Commission had a few statistics again that look about what this looks like long term, and estimate around 20% of nurses, behavioral health, and specialty care workers are over 55 years old, and so might be looking to retire over the next 10 years. Also found that around 3.7% of the healthcare workforce is leaving annually and is not being replaced by new graduates. And then, of course, as we're thinking about all those opportunities with legal immigrants that have come here, opportunities to make sure that we're using their skill sets well. Of course, there's also a lot of opportunity at the federal level with visa reform, but not within the scope of that, so we'll leave that to Washington. And that's all I have for y'all this morning, so certainly happy to answer questions. But again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and appreciate y'all's service on this committee to address this issue.
Thank you, Daniela. It's good information. So you hear the challenge we face with these, the growth we're having and the statistics she gave us. And licensure, it certainly is a barrier to entry into the workforce for a lot of people. And I know I didn't ask you this to prepare this, but, and it maybe somebody in the room knows, but what percentage of the job postings that we have require a occupational license?
I can look that up for
I think I've
you.
seen that in a
Yeah.
recent meeting, but it's a pretty high percentage. It's pretty surprising how high that is. So certainly that's a challenge. I've got, and I'm sure my colleagues will have some questions too, but on the workforce participation percentage, is this kind of a national trend?
Yes.
I mean, are we an anomaly, or is this?
No, Georgia, we've certainly kind of seen this nationally. Other states are going through similar things. Certainly, Georgia, I think is in the middle in terms of where we stack with our labor force participation rate. But we certainly have other states that we're competing with that are doing better in this arena. Obviously, it's something that's an opportunity. And when we look to different communities around the state, we see lower numbers than the state average. I think Bibb County was around 55%. So again, as we're thinking about the statewide need, we've got different pockets depending on community need, where you are even seeing lower numbers than that 61.3%.
Is part of that just lifestyle choices and maybe wanting to have one parent, dedicated to parenting the children and staying home raising the family?
Absolutely.
Versus, I mean, both parents working and the children in daycare.
Yes. So certainly this is going to encompass individuals that are choosing to stay home because it is better for their family to have one parent working or one parent at home. It also could include individuals that may have disabilities, that have trouble accessing the workforce. So there's a wide range of why you have this 40% that has opted to not participate in the workforce. And certainly, again, the high point of this in recent history was around 68 or a little over 69%. And so, a 7-point drop is still very significant. And if we had those folks in the workforce, we would certainly be meeting a lot more of our current workforce shortages. But, I think it's fair to say that you would always have a portion of the workforce that would not opt in for various reasons.
So we have 350,000 unique job postings currently, a little over 350,000. And your projection is that the number of jobs over the next decade is going to increase by over 2.5 million, looks like to me, from 5,285,000 to 7,845,000.
Yes, sir.
And yet our population is only going to increase 1.2 million. So that makes the delta. So we're going to go. That's 1 point. So we're going to be like 1.6 or 7 million in open positions if these projections hold true.
Absolutely. And so I think
even
that's
if 100% of the population growth went to work, which
Right.
they're not. So it's actually going to be a big, big deficit in workers. So it seems clear to me that we're going to have to recruit workers from other states to grow, to fill the need in our economy. And as we do that, I think the licensure issue becomes even more of a problem for that. The other thing that I think is happening, and COVID accelerated this, is we've got Georgians that are, live here, but they're working for companies virtually out of state because their licensing requirements are, maybe they don't even have to have a license to do that job, or maybe it's easier to get a license. And I think we are seeing that in all the fields, but I think in like psychology and psychologists and some of the medical fields, they're, able to make more money maybe doing it that way and have less barriers to entry. So we're at a competitive disadvantage. We're not going to be able to recruit these people from other states if we have a burdensome licensure system, which we do have, which we'll hear about that later. And we're competing, with the ability to really work anywhere in the world in certain jobs virtually. So I think we are, it's imperative and incumbent upon us to try to fix this problem. Senate Bill 157, sponsored by Senator Strickland, is a high priority for the Senate. It passed unanimously in the Senate, and I guess it'll come back, be in committee in the Senate, or
It's in the House.
in the House. But that's going to be a high priority for us that deals with some criminal history. And Senator Dugan and I are on the Georgia Works Commission, and we got a lot of good information about that at our meeting Tuesday. And people that are arrested and not convicted, it still creates a problem for them with employment. And so I applaud Senator Strickland for his work on that. And the Lieutenant Governor this is a high priority for him. For the public that's watching, that we get this passed. And then for me, and a lot of us in the legislature, I represent Robins Air Force Base, and the spousal licensure, which we're going to hear about more today too, is something that I'm real passionate about. And we have, had legislation that got out of Senator Dugan's committee that was really, he helped me improve it and perfect it. It was really good legislation, and again, got hung up in the House with some things going on there. So we're going to continue to work on that. All right, I've talked enough. Senator Strickland.
Thank you. Daniela, as Senator Walker was saying, thank you all for your support of Senate Bill 157. I think that bill is going to go a long ways in really making more of a uniform process as to how criminal records are handled by all these different boards. You mentioned 40% of our state having a criminal record. And what we learned in working on that issue, I want to applaud Representative Bentley, who's here as well. We spent last year in a separate study group that was kind of unofficial looking at that issue. And we saw and heard from people that were not trying to work because they thought they couldn't.
Yeah.
They didn't know how their record would affect them even getting in industries. And then we heard from an attorney that was handling appeals for people that were denied licensing who does this for a living and has trouble navigating that. We realized how difficult it is for individuals to ever navigate that process. So it now sits in the House, and we have broad support in the House, I believe, as well. It just got caught up in the back and forth last year. So that'll be, I believe, back in the Judiciary Committee, I think, in the House this year, coming up next year. Question for you in the labor force participation rate, some of the same things that Chairman Walker was asking. You mentioned how this compares nationally. Do you know if the aging population, does this include people of working age, or is this everyone? Is the aging population that we have impacted by this, or they're not counted in that rate? Do you know?
Sure. So it's usually defined by US BLS by 25 to 64.
Okay.
So there is the potential too that as individuals are maybe older and choosing to still participate in the workforce, that some of those are captured as well. And we're certainly encouraging businesses across the state to think creatively how to use individuals that have lots of expertise to offer and still want to contribute a lot to make sure they're utilizing things well.
But it also goes to show it's not just because people are getting older, they're not counted in that. The other question I have, you may not know the answer to this, I'm not sure if anybody does, has there been any study that goes the next step and asks people why they're not working? There's many reasons people may choose not to work, but it'd be great to know, just even from a survey standpoint, what the reason is. I look at the child care shortage.
Yep.
I know people, maybe it's just people I know that are young parents that aren't able to work because they can't find childcare. I know someone right now that's considering taking a leave of absence from a professional job because she can't find anybody to take care of her child. She lost her child care person. She's on wait lists at places. And so that's just one little factor that could be in there that we saw related to the overall issue of workforce. So I'd be curious if we have seen any studies that would show why people are choosing more and more around the country, more so not to work.
Absolutely. We can pull some information, but I have not seen a great survey. I think it is one of those things that people do consistently ask, where are these individuals? I think we'd love to show them some of our TCSG programs and things that are options. But absolutely, childcare is a huge issue, and we do have a shortage of childcare workers. Speaking from personal experience with a daughter in childcare, we were on a wait list for a long time to get her into the right place where she's safe. So absolutely, it's a huge challenge, and certainly one of the reasons too why we saw tremendous levels of women leaving the workforce during the pandemic. And so still trying to make sure we've got folks into the workforce that want to contribute, but all those other factors need to be right for them able to make that choice.
Senator Dugan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Strickland, I'm sorry. I lied to you and said I wasn't going to ask anything.
That's why I talked so long.
Yeah. Danielle, always good to
Yes,
see
sir.
you. I'm gonna tag on that one too. The 177,000 one. We need more context with that. How
Yeah.
many of that 177,000 are actually looking for jobs that require a certification, which would be pertinent to this particular committee? And it's not only child care availability. Some of these are child care cost.
Yep.
So if you got one, that's availability. You got three, you start looking at, is it more economically feasible for one of these to stay at home with the children while the other one works because of the cost portion of it. Second one is a question. If you could look back at 1998,
Yep.
what were we doing differently then than we're doing now?
Probably a couple different things, but certainly, there's been a lot of conversation again why we've seen this decline because it is something that we've seen nationally, and there's a number of different reasons, but there's not one silver bullet. People are choosing to want more flexibility, and so they're thinking about these options differently. There are a lot of costs that have risen over the years and maybe always haven't tracked with salary growth, and so we've seen a lot of different trends kind of impact this number, but I would say there's not one clear factor. I would say Georgia has experienced this in a little different way because, we were able to bring a lot of folks into the state to meet our workforce needs for a lot of years, having the fact that we've got lots of people from other southern states that were moving in and filling our workforce shortages. But we've kind of seen that slow in recent years, and then with the tremendous growth, it's created more of a challenge. There was actually some recent research that showed that Georgia has 159% more unfilled positions than unemployed individuals in the state, and the national average is 67%. So again, as we're thinking about what's unique about Georgia, it's that our needs are a lot more acute than other places. Of course, other people are very envious of what we've seen from an economic growth perspective. They want the economy that we have, but that certainly requires, innovative and strategic thinking about how to use the people that we have here and then how to strategically recruit folks into the state that meet those workforce needs that we're seeing from an industry perspective just grow and expand.
When you go back and look at 1998,
Yes, sir.
And I understand the types of jobs have changed significantly
Yes.
since that. Matter of fact, they didn't have smartphones back then. But when you go back and look at that,
Yes,
would you
sir.
look at the percentage of the population that was involved in agriculture in 98 that was considered employed versus now?
Yes.
And the only last question I have is on the Georgia's War for Talent. Obviously the situation with yellow is not good. How is that going to impact the availability of CDL drivers on your slide there? What are you forecasting?
The need for CDL drivers is tremendous. I would say we consistently hear from folks that this is one of the biggest limitations, which is why we're really seeing industry think about how do we is this something we try to automate faster because we are just seeing tremendous shortages. And I would say too, that's why we've seen more and more challenges with getting products to people faster. Of course, a lot of this was accelerated with COVID as we're seeing so much more e-commerce growth. It was something that happened very, very quickly. But two, as we think about a competitiveness perspective, if we don't have the truck drivers here to move goods in and out of the state, it's going to impact the activity at the ports and everything that we've really been able to grow grow strategically. So I would say we really look at that. And for the truck drivers, retiring soon is almost the same number of the new postings. So we hear from a lot of companies engaged in this effort that it is a significant challenge for them to recruit folks.
That's fine.
You kept talking, so it generated
Sorry.
another question. No. That's why you're
Okay.
here. So how much flexibility do we have within defining what is required for a CDL within the state?
So the one thing I hear a lot of where we experience this big issue on the tractor trailer truck drivers is that in order to cross state lines, you have to be 21 years old, which obviously is where a lot of the need is. That's at the federal level, unfortunately. And so there obviously is flexibility within the licensing here, but consistently that's something that we hear. So I know there's lots of movement within Congress to try to continue to push this, especially as we're thinking about getting folks on a talent pipeline. If we want to make sure that we're catching kids in middle school and high school and really showing them the opportunity, if you would then have to wait 3 years and do something else and then come back to CDL, it's a big hurdle from that recruitment perspective.
That's what I was asking.
Yeah.
Do we have the flexibility to set up a different category of CDL that is a short haul CDL where you could be lower than 21?
That's a great question. I'll do some research to see if that would be something that would be an option. But I know that crossing state lines is usually something that is very important, obviously, to get folks from industry perspective.
So I think that you can get a CDL prior to 21. It's just, you can't
Cross state
cross
lines.
state lines. And the other issue is the company's insurance carrier is going to have guidelines for their drivers too. And that becomes an issue, you know. A lot of them want the drivers to have 3 years' experience and so on and so forth. So it's, Mr. Sterling, I don't think is here. So Sarah, do you mind to go out of order and go ahead and present your portion? Thank you very much, Danielle. Awesome. Sarah Crittenden is with our Office of Legislative Counsel, and she's got some good information she's going to share with us today on some recent court cases and just the legal landscape of licensing and where it is in our code section, et cetera. So. And she put all this together for me on short notice. I appreciate that.
Anything for you, Senator. So, I'm Sarah Crittenden. I'm an attorney with the Office of Legislative Counsel, and we draft your bills. And I've been doing it for 2 years. Before that, I was with the Department of Insurance, so I have some experience with dealing with licensure and criminal investigations and how to handle background checks and that sort of thing. So I was really excited to help out with this committee. I'm going to talk to you, so I got to come down here. So I'm going to talk to you today about sort of opening up licensure and what's going on federally, and in the Service Members Civil Relief Act, which is a federal law. And then Senator Walker asked me specifically to talk about a recent Texas District Court case. And I'd like to take a moment to talk about interstate licensure compacts, which comes up a lot, where all this goes in Georgia law. And then finally, Senator Walker asked that we talk about a recent Georgia Supreme Court case. So that's a lot to cover. I set the timer, it's going. So we'll see what we can do. The Service Members Civil Relief Act, or the SCRA, is found in federal law under 50 U.S.C. Section 3901 to 4043. This act is designed to help service members when they have to transition to active duty, and it provides some civil protections, which you'll see up there, protections about foreclosure, repossession, leasing agreements, evictions, interest rates, and default judgments. The concept of protecting our service members goes way back. I did a little, one day's research, but it goes back. There were laws in the Civil War, in World War I, and in World War II to protect servicemen when they get called to duty. And in fact, it used to be called the Soldiers and Sailors Civil Relief Act, SSCRA. In 2003, it was overhauled and became the Service Members Civil Relief Act. And for our purposes, there was an addition in 2023, this year, on the portability of professional licenses. So this was signed in January of this year and went into effect in January of this year to allow service members and their spouses to use their professional licenses and certificates when they relocate due to military orders. So this is sort of a hybrid. I tried to cut and paste the actual law because you never want to blur it, because it is. We have to look at the exact words to understand what's going on here, who it applies to, and what it covers. So it applies to service members or their spouse who has a covered license, and that's a defined term in the law. And it's when they relocate because of a military order for military service outside of the jurisdiction where the license was issued. The huge benefit of this is the covered license shall be considered valid, which is a phenomenal statement in the law for them just to blanket say that. The interesting thing legislatively for me was, it's not forever, it's for the duration of the military order, and then under certain conditions or circumstances. So what the service member or spouse must do is and this is in the law, this is cut and paste from the law, they have to provide a copy of the order to the licensing authority. They have to remain in good standing with the original licensing authority and in good standing of every other licensing authority that they've been issued. And they have to, and this is very important as a receiving state, is they have to submit to the authority of the licensing authority in the new jurisdiction. So that's a great save that gives the receiving state some leverage. Interestingly, the federal law specifically yields to states that are participating in interstate licensure compacts. So some of you may not be familiar with what an interstate licensure compact is, and I'll talk about this later, but this is from the Service Members Civil Relief Act, and it provides an exception. So the federal law is yielding to the state's agreements, which is also an exciting, yay, law. But it's exciting to see the federal law is saying, okay, if you states have worked it out in a licensure compact, then you get to control. This is also from the Service Members Civil Relief Act is what is a covered license. This is a definition. It's a professional license that is in good standing with the licensing authority, and that the service member or spouse has actively used during the 2 years, and that it's not a license to practice law. So they carved out law. Yay. So, so I underlined this phrase "has actively used" because that's going to come up in a case. This is a recent case, Porty, and I think there's supposed to be an accent, but I'm just going to say Porty versus Morath. It's a recent case. Out of Texas, so it does not have any governing on us, but it's a very interesting case because we're going to see the little dance between federal and state law. It's out of Texas. It's a district court case, so there's a chance this may all be appealed. More likely it will be appealed, but for now, this is where it stands. It was on the application and scope of the licensure and portability provision in the SCRA. There was a conflict with the Texas requirements. So the plaintiff was Hannah Porty, a service member's spouse. She had a school counseling license from Ohio and Missouri, and she got married, and her husband was transferred to Texas for military purposes. So all of that falls under SCRA. And she applied for a job in Texas, and Texas refused, saying they had an extra requirement, as most states do, so they had an extra requirement that she had to have 2 years of experience. She appealed. They refused. She filed a lawsuit. They moved for preliminary injunction, and the district court granted it. There was some argument about whether she had to be employed for 2 years or just if she used her license in that 2 years period. And the district court sided with the plaintiff. So what does this mean for us is that we have to be mindful of what the federal government's doing. What I found out after the fact is that the Department of Justice was very clear all along about where they stood on this. So in July of this year, the Department of Justice issued a letter to all state licensing authorities regarding the professional licensing portability provisions. And you can find it at their website, and I don't think I printed out a copy, but it's very clear. The law is very clear, and it's very clear to them that they're going to enforce this law, and they're going to support the military members and their spouses in their pursuit of justice if they want to get licensed. They also filed, which is kind of interesting too, is they filed a statement of interest in the Porty versus Morath case, saying that she was likely to succeed on her merits and why they were going to vigorously enforce this section and why she had standing to bring the case. So the message is very clear to the states that this is something important to the Department of Justice and to federal government. So as mentioned earlier, yep.
So can we, before we move on to another subject,
Yes, sir.
that's pretty significant, I think, and very recent. Can we talk about that, Sarah? Is that all right with you? And
Yes.
maybe ask some questions and
I'll do my
maybe
best.
Wanda, I may call you back up so what does that mean for us in the Georgia legislature? Do we need to align our statute to align with that federal statute? Does it mean we need to not do anything and face potential lawsuits and see how the courts, let the courts sort it out? I mean, what is the prudent path forward?
So, in my opinion, I think the prudent path is for state licensing agencies to really take a look at their requirements and open it up to be compliant with the federal law. The interesting thing is, and we'll talk about this, is so the SCRA is for active military. And some of our laws are more, the laws that we drafted are more about transitioning service members. And so it's a little bit different. So I don't think we need to repeal anything or changing our law. I think state agencies need to be aware of this law and need to work review their applicants with this in mind, just saying, oh, yeah, this might be an issue. I don't think we need to change our laws yet.
Sarah, we've argued in the legislature over, is 90 days long enough to recognize a military spouse license from another state? Is 60 days, should it be 30 days? I come down on 30 days. This is immediately.
I don't think they put a timeline, but I think, right,
Well, if
sooner is.
you'll go back
Do we go-
to one of your first slides, it said something about absolute.
It said it shall be valid, you're right.
It doesn't say in 30 days or 90 days.
Right, shall be considered valid. I mean, I think state agencies have a right to, they need time to review and make sure all the documents are in place, but you're right, I mean, it says it shall be considered valid.
There was a caveat on the next one, though.
Is it? Next one?
Yeah.
No. No.
It-
Sorry, this one, one more?
No, I think that's it.
Whoop, sorry. I put these animations in, I thought I was being clever, and it's just a pain.
Wouldn't 2B and 3 kind of address the gaining state up there?
2B is licenses in other states that they've held, so I don't think that.
But it has to be similar. We have to see it as similar to their.
That does seem very subjective to me, that part, but. So.
Yeah, I don't know, I think,
is not.
yeah, I think,
Straightforward.
I mean, I yield to, it takes a lot to, I know with the insurance department, it takes a lot to review. It takes, you have to have, a lot of documents, and you need someone to review those documents and confirm. It does take time to process an application.
Wanda, do you mind addressing us on this? Sure. I wondered, have you, so again, this is Wanda Jaffe, the Deputy Director of Professional License Boards. Have you run into this, or how are you all handling this?
So we've been handling military expedites since 2018. So we have tracked those. Most applications are touched within 3 business days of receiving that military application. Now, I can go back and pull the numbers. I didn't really prepare it for today. I wasn't expecting to present. But I have numbers that can show you how quickly the application is touched and how quickly a person gets licensed if they are marked military on their applications. I have a spreadsheet that I track those daily since 2018. I will tell you the problem with some of these things is that the federal government, and I hate to say this, but sometimes they are creating laws without taking in the state's considerations. We at Georgia, we are here to license people, but we are also here to protect the public. So there are 2 facets for the licensing boards. We issue licenses, but we also follow up on complaint and compliance to make sure our Georgians are safe within the practices. So having the time to be able to receive these verifications from these other states, that is very important, because if they've got a pending case in another state, do we want to put potential Georgians at risk when there's a pending case of some sort of malpractice in another state? So some of those things you have to take into consideration. These are what we call the exceptions to the rule, but there are things that you have to consider when you're talking about time frames. Another thing you want to think about is that the response of those other states. I'm dealing with a client that is trying to get a massage therapy license. They cannot get Texas to send us the verification. I personally went on behalf of this customer and called Texas. I waited on hold for 3.5 hours and still never received any assistance or an answer. I sent emails to 3 different divisions for the state of Texas, still with no response. I called back the next day and waited for 2 hours. This is what these people that are moving to Georgia, this is what they're having to deal with. He came in here and he was like, I came in here and met somebody within 5 minutes. I can't get a response out of Texas. Unfortunately, what if there is a malpractice in Texas? I feel for these people. I'm prior military. I moved around a lot, and I feel sincerely for them. And I feel like they need to be working. But what if I took the chance and issued them a license, and then come to find out that even though Texas was slow to respond, they've got 10 cases of sexual assault? So there are things that you have to take into consideration. But as far as being a pro-military, Georgia is one of the few states that are so very pro-military. We add veterans preference points for exams that gives them some credit. They have disability credit that we take for that to help them get their exams. We are very pro-military. And I have seen, and I can pull up the spreadsheets, I just don't have them handy, but most of our applications are issued within 5 to 10 days. Then again, with the exceptions, it can make it look like it's 50 days to get a license, but you got to look over the long period and what those exceptions are.
So has this federal law changed your process and procedures, or are you all still operating this? I mean, has this had any impact?
Not in a significant manner, because we were already pro-military, if that makes any sense. We were already a step ahead of the game, so we already were taking in this information and preparing it and getting people licensed here. So it made us look at a couple of things, because there was some law that was saying that it had to be substantially, somewhat similar. And so some of the states, for example, I hate to say Texas again, but one state for a profession only requires 300 hours worth of training, where we require 1,500 hours. So that's not substantially equal, even though it's the same license type. So when we're looking at these things, those are some of the things that we had to take into consideration, which is why we kind of pushed back and said, let it be substantially equal, not just, similar. So it has changed a little bit in how we process, but not a lot, because we were already proactive there.
One more question. What kind of volume, I'm sure it's a small percentage of your total volume, but is the military licensure a pretty robust volume of activity, or?
No, we issue, I'm trying to think about my spreadsheets because I try to track all the numbers. A couple of hundred a year is military for licenses, that where they're actually marking that they are transitional military, that they are, moving here. It's just a couple of hundred a year. I think one year we had like 700 and something, but don't quote me on the numbers because I don't have my spreadsheet right in front of me. But that's very little when you compare it to all the licenses that we do here.
Do you have a question, Senator Dugan?
Not that you can answer right now. I was just kind of curious what we're getting for that additional 1,200 hours worth of training without knowing what the thing was. There are some, that's going to come to something else that we talk about, is the number of hours we're requiring for some of this stuff.
Quick lawyer question.
Yeah. Why are you here?
Elizabeth Scritton
I'm
today
not a
to
lawyer.
answer. What did you say last night? My question was what year this law was passed for Sarah, I guess. What year was this federal law passed?
The new one
Right.
is this year,
So-
2023, and it went into effect, it was signed and went into effect.
So in that Texas suit, is anybody challenging the constitutionality of the law overall, the idea that the federal government's going to require this? The reason I asked that question is, if so, are we prudent to really not focus too much on this federal law until we see where this thing goes in the federal courts?
Yeah, I don't know if that was raised in the case. Her case actually started before this case. I mean, before the law changed, and then it was brought in, and the federal government sent in a letter or a statement of interest, which I think is unusual. So, there is an argument for, let's see, there's appeal process, there's, appeal up the up their side, and another case we've got coming, there's appeals, but I think the federal government's sending us signals to help its service members, to make their lives easier. And all of this, remember, all of this is based on trying to help our active military who have been called up and are moving. They're moving, whatever it is. So it is a small subset of
The
who-
transitioning.
yeah. So, ready? We're
Ready.
good?
All right.
Okay, all right,
Thank
let's see where we are. Sorry.
Interstate compacts, I think. Escape, show up.
Okay. So interstate licensure compacts, which is an exception to the SCR's portability law. So, let's see if this works. Oh. I think it's working. Maybe. There we go. Oh my goodness. My head's going to explode. Okay, I'm not sure where to look or read. But, so, if you go to this website, we have a occupational licensure compacts. Actually, there are a lot of compacts in our OCGA, and it has to do with agreements like on water, borders, or there's just a lot of compacts. But we're focusing just on occupational licensure compacts. There are about 15 available. And actually, if you scroll down, so it'll say, this is a great website you can go to. Just keep going down, 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 down. Here's our list of the 15. Georgia has signed on to about 8 of those. 7 are in Title 43, and then 1 is in another title. And just a heads up, there's a dietitian compact coming and a school psychologist compact coming. Let me see. So is there a way to... Yeah. If I just hit enter. So I've got a list of which ones we've gone to. Can we click on this one? And this was, oh good, that came up. This was just, I'd like to point out that the Department of Defense is very much aware of these licensure compacts, and this is posted on their website, and there's a whole bunch of links so that service members and their spouses are aware of which compacts are working and where their licensures can be eased along. Okay, back to here. Okay. So most of the licensure compacts are in Title 43. The point of interstate licensure compacts is to make it easier for people to get licensed, to use their license, but also to provide some safeguards so there's some better exchange of data and information between states. Okay, so, oh, did I skip one? Oh, I think I might have. So this, sorry, Sorry, you never want to let a lawyer talk. There's all these things I wanted to talk about. I was going to tell you about each bill that went through and what year it went through, but you'll just have to read it in the news. So in addition to licensure compacts, we've got some great law that, in just this one section in Title 43, it's 43-134, and then the next ones we'll do also. And this is for transitioning service members. It gives them, if you'll see in line B, and this I think is where she was saying, like, since 2018, this has been a priority. So they get sort of front of the line temporary licenses, license and expedite licenses, or a combination. So Georgia has been really positive about helping its military, and this is specific to transitioning service members. And as you know, like with any bill, there's a lot of give and take and chaos at the end of session, so things get added, things get taken out. So we do the best we can to get a good law for you. But this one has been on the books probably since 2017 with some adjustments. And then this past year, this section of the law was amended heartily, 43-135, which is more about spouses and individuals. And this one, we really worked hard to try to get this to protect the licensing part of the world, but also to keep businesses open, keep the licensing going. If you'll see under section B, I don't want to read this but I love this. It's great language. It's for an expedited license by endorsement. So this part of the law is for spouses of a service member or transitioning service member stationed in Georgia. And then we added a little bit more. And I did think about this with Senator Walker's concerns. Do we need to adjust this? And I think, in my opinion, and I am going to go talk to some of my senior attorneys about, do we need to change B3? And I don't think we do, but that is something I'm wondering if that's in conflict or if it's okay, because this is really just for a different group. The SCRA is for active military under orders, transferring under orders, and this is a little bit different. The second part of this law, or the third part of this law, is we really opened it up to any individuals crossing borders. So this was kind of an exciting change to the law. This, of course, is not affected by SCRA at all, but this was an exciting, very exciting to put into place. Whoops. Oh, and then the end, of course, we've got the little saver. We also say, if you look under G, the licensing compacts, these are agreements we made with our brethren states. We honor those agreements, and those agreements control. So I know I've been talking a lot, and I do want to show you if this works. Uh-oh. Well, it may not work, but I did do you think you can get it? If you can get it to work, it'd be great. You never want to leave an attorney with time on their hands. So in May, after the session, after I'd recovered from the session, I was like, hey, what is going on in Title 43? So I painstakingly went through every chapter and said, okay, this becomes an issue is what constitutes a professional licensing board? What is an other board? What is under the Secretary of State's office? And I'm going to get your business card. What do they consider under their wings or under their whatever shield? No worky?
We're getting there.
It's a beautiful spreadsheet with multiple colors, blue and green and yellow. And I worked really hard on it. And it's got, 10 columns about what how many boards we have? 43. We just lost one, maybe. We'll talk about that in a minute. And which ones are under the Secretary of State's office? Well, not really lost. Well, there's a case. It's not lost. There was just, no. Well, I'll send you an email with a beautiful spreadsheet. Steve, that's okay. Maybe I'll try the next. See if that one works. No? Okay, well, you'll just have to imagine it's a beautiful spreadsheet with lots of colors. And I think I figured out there's like 8 or 9 that are specifically not under the Secretary of State, and then some that are specifically under the Secretary of State's office, and then some that are squishy that I assume are probably under the Secretary of State's office. So, and lest you forget, not everything's in Title 43. We have plenty of licensing outside of Title 43, and this is just a list of random things I just kind of gathered. So there's lots of licensing that even when we cover it in Title 43, it doesn't reach out unless we say it's going to cover it. And just to give you an example, of course, this becomes a big deal. We have not signed on to my knowledge, I didn't see it, we didn't sign on to a teacher compact. And teaching is kind of a hard one, I think, for people to agree, for states to agree to, because there's a lot of state requirements. And so we do have 2 statutes on the book for transferring out of state and military spouses. And that's about all I could find as far as letting out-of-state people get licensed. Okay, so the big winner, Jackson v. Raffensperger, and so this is an exciting case. That the complaint was filed in 2018, just after the Georgia Lactation Consultant Practice Act was enacted. And the challenge was based on they challenged the constitutionality of the act on due process, Georgia due process clause violations, equal protection clause violations. So of course I put those 2 up there. The plaintiffs were Mary Jackson and Reaching Out Our Sisters Everywhere, a nonprofit organization. The acronym was ROSE. And the defendants, I think it started out under Kemp and then Raffensperger was substituted. So this case has gone up and down. What we call Jackson 1. The lawsuit was filed, and the trial court dismissed the claim, saying they failed to state a claim, upon which relief could be granted, and that was appealed. And the Georgia Supreme Court reversed and remanded with direction to the trial court to reconsider. And they said that they had a long history of interpreting the Georgia Constitution as protecting the right to work in one's chosen profession from unreasonable government interference. And that's a key phrase there. And then and they said that the trial court erred in concluding that plaintiffs are not similarly situated. So that was Jackson 1, and this is just a quick overview. So that was in 2020. And then it went back to the trial court. There was some discovery and negotiations and talk and whatnot. And on remand, the trial court granted one motion for summary judgment for one side and motion for summary judgment for the other side. And both sides appealed. And so then we got to Jackson 2. And this is the case that just came out this May 2023, and the Georgia Supreme Court concluded that the act was unconstitutional on due process grounds, but did not reach the equal protection claim. So due process, here's your 5-second law school intro to due process. So there is a due process clause in the I already put it up there, but in the Georgia Constitution, it's always been there, and the Supreme Court is very proud that they've long recognized it. And I bolded the phrase, lawful occupation of their choosing, free from unreasonable government interference. And then this is also from the case where they say, provide some guidelines on when can the government interfere. When there's public health, safety, morality, and other phases of general welfare. Generally, step one, the burden's on the plaintiff to show the occupation is lawful and the regulation burdens them. Then step two is the government must offer a legitimate interest. And then step three is the plaintiff has to prove that it unreasonably interferes. So in 5 seconds or less, now you can all go to law school. And I'm happy to answer questions. I know I went a little long. I've got lots of I printed things, and I know the website links didn't work, but I'm happy to send you information if you want. My contact information is there. It's fascinating subject, always interesting, and always a pleasure to work with my colleagues. Thank you.
Any questions for Sarah? Thank you so much, Sarah. That was very informative, and we'll make any of this material available to anybody that wants it. Are these PowerPoints going to be available?
Yes, sir,
Online? All right. Thank you. All right. Last now on our agenda, we've got Mr. Gabe Sterling, Chief Operating Officer of the Office of Secretary of State.
Here, but I'll go ahead and pull up his presentation. All right.
Is it? We'll have it memorized then by then. Governor. I think he's coming. And I'm up. Okay.
Good morning. Y'all ever had one of those days? My phone has had an update, and I feel like crap right now, but I'm here to present to y'all. All right, so a couple of things. First of all, I wanted to welcome y'all today. I'm thankful for that. We have this building licenses nearly over 500,000 people in this state. And the people work very hard on that, and I appreciate all their work that they do every day. And it's not easy. And we get about 2,000 phone calls a day coming in for corporations, PLB, and everything else, but most of it's for PLB. And we, as Senator Walker, you heard a couple of days ago, where we bring in about 24 million, we got 8.5 million. And the nurses did a great job trying to present for our budget, so we appreciated that. And you saw that as well, Senator. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide.
All right, so y'all heard what he's saying is on licensing fees generates about 25 million, and their budget for the professional licensing boards, 8.5 million.
About, yes, sir. From the state, yes, sir. And, oh, they're teeny tiny, okay. Okay.
So the license and the fees go to the general fund,
Fees to our good friends at Treasury, yes, sir.
and then we reappropriate a portion of them, essentially.
The majority of them. But the good part about that is, in Georgia, we're about 8.5 million. In Alabama, which is about 2/3 of our size, they spend about 30 million on licensing because they have individual licensing boards that all run themselves. Our joint boards, the way we do them, saves the taxpayers a lot of money, but still generates money for the general fund. All right, so next to the next slide. All right, so this is where we are right now on the rollout. In 2020, we used a state contract through Carasoft to contract with Salesforce and MTX to build out a new system. Our old system, EMLO, did a great job for Georgia for about 20 years. It was from systems automation, and it functioned, but it's getting a little long in the tooth now. And we've been able to use the bond money left over from the voting systems that y'all reappropriated about $4 million to build the system out, plus general funds that we've been able to do in part because we haven't had a director other than me, and I get no extra money for that, to go towards building the system out. We are in the UAT process right now, and in the UAT, that's user acceptance testing. We have analysts, executive directors, board members, attorneys general who work with us, going through all the different pieces and parts. And we've done about 5,000, or actually 4,800, what we call instances or stories, which is the interactions within the system itself. We still have another 4,000 or 5,000 to go for the first round. And right now, we're looking at October of 23 to roll out the first sections of these, because our intention is to not have analysts working in two systems. They have to work in a single system at a time. So we're going to do the cutover. Actually, can we go to the next slide real quick? We're doing product development and then data migration. Data migration is the biggest single item we have to deal with on this one right now, because it is millions of records. We're in testing right now. We're a little slower than we wanted to be, but that's okay. We'd rather be right than fast when it comes to these things. So the first cutover is going to be coming up in October, and that's ending user training for that. We're doing training and testing all the way through. I see January 24 and February 24. That's when nursing goes in. We want to get all of our problems out of the way before we get to nurses, because those are obviously our most important ones, and they will all yell at us if we have anything wrong. And I guarantee we're going to have things that are wrong. It's a new software rollout. We know that. So we're doing the 3 tranches. We originally knew 4. We pushed it to 3. And February 24 is a little aggressive. I don't know if we're going to make that or not, but that is our intention right now. So we have people working their tails off. Now, one of the things we have to understand about this is, and I know my executive director is sitting in the back of the room, our best analysts are the ones we're doing the testing. If they're doing testing, they can't do licenses. So we're having a little bit of a slowdown right now when it comes to licensing, but it's going to be best for the long term. And we've tried to explain to people, we're not that slow overall. And Senator Walker, you were there day before yesterday, listening to nurses. The composite medical board, which is the medical board right now, they have months longs. We are still the fastest part of this process at about 30 days. And it's not great. I wish we could just do that, This new system will allow us to do that, because one of the good things about this system is an administrative fix, which is essentially analysts don't look at anything until you have all of what I call the binary things. Do you have a verifiable ID? Yes. Do you have your scores from your schools? Yes. Do you have your transcripts? Yes. Analysts are not going to look at anything until the applicant has all that stuff uploaded, and they'll have a dashboard to see you're missing this, 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 and this, or you're not missing anything. We are really working pretty quickly on this stuff, and one of the slides we saw on Tuesday at a chamber event was we've nearly doubled the amount of licenses we're doing. We went from we're at record levels in every single one of our trades, record levels of applications and licensing. And what I think this committee should look at, and our Georgia Works Commission, is we want to take away, if we can, the sort of subjective items that boards have to look at. And that's the thing that makes things difficult, is the subjective side. There are things that need to be subjective, but we need to be able to do them faster and take as many of those away as we can. And with the court case that was discussed earlier, we now can only look at, when you're looking at the laws we have to look at, health and safety. There's a secondary part of that which I think we need to look at, which is the fiduciary side, which wasn't addressed necessarily in the Jackson v. Raffensperger case. Cemeteries that have large pots of money that we have to look at, we've moved that to our securities group because we know that those people have the skills to be able to regulate those. But there's several of those in our sections right now. But in general, we're going to move to this system. We're going to move faster than anybody in any other state is doing it. We started in 2020. We will be finishing in 2023. We would have been done already, but our voter registration system was dying faster than licensing was. So we pushed that to the front of the line, and we launched that in about 19 months. So we have a very good partner in MTX, a very good partner in Salesforce, and a very good partner in Transform, which is sort of our project management partner on this. And we expect to be done, again, I don't think it's going to be February, but I'm hopeful it's February, but probably March, April, May. But even then, we will be moving faster to a better system than most of the country will. And
Gabe,
yes, sir.
Excuse me, but so you won't have paper applications when this is completely finished? I mean, will the applicants go online, complete their application through the portal online, and upload their supporting documentation, and that ought to speed things up a lot.
The intention is to do that, yes, sir. And we will still have an intake. We can't just go 100%, but we've done a couple of things. We got a $10 fee now if you put it in by mail. It's the same thing we have in corporations. We're trying, and we're going to make it more and more painful. We'll probably raise that fee because we're paying for individuals to actually handle that paper, and it's a $5 fee for online. So we're trying to push people that way, and that $5 fee is going towards paying for the licensing and build out of the system, and on the licensing that will go on in perpetuity essentially, because that's what you have to do to keep the software up. And there's a code section that allows us to do a collection fee for that purpose. Senator Dugan, you always have a question for me. Come on.
I got 3 minutes. I do. I'm always appreciative that y'all's office is good on these software updates. What I do have a question is, some of these military ones that are coming in that know, since we were picking on Texas a little while ago, I'm at Fort Hood, Texas. I know my spouse has orders to go to Fort Moore, Georgia. If I have those orders in hand already, but I have not actually physically moved, can I start this process?
Yes.
Electronically?
It will be, once this is all done, you can now. I mean, essentially, when it comes to the military stuff, we put you to the front of the line. but you still have to have all of your items in place. And that's really our biggest problem. And they say, I'm a military spouse or I'm a military person. And they say, I should be at the front line. You should be at the front of the line, but you still have to get all of your items in so that we can actually process you.
That's why I was asking if you do it on the front side, because as a retired military person, moved virtually every 2 years, it's easier to find that stuff before the movers come
Yes.
than after the movers have dropped it off.
Or in a box somewhere at your new house. I understand. Yes, sir. Yes, you can start the process. Senator Strickland?
We have 25 minutes. The only question I have, and we discussed this, I think, during session with SB 157 that we worked on this past year. I think one of the things your office mentioned was this rollout and trying to, and basically my question would be, how does the change in the way we deal with criminal records, something that's less subjective now, as you mentioned, with this change in the law, is that an impact in any way, or is that change going to be impacted in any way by this new rollout? Or
It shouldn't be, but we'll be able to, once you pass 157, we will be able to handle it better. Now, the issues we have around some of the stuff with arrests versus convictions, and our office's position essentially is, yes, we can look at arrests, but without a full due process. I'm not a lawyer. It makes no sense to me if you get arrested for something 20 years ago, that's somehow relevant if you're going to be a massage therapist. I don't fully understand how that works, but the law allows for that. So when you pass 157, I believe it should free up this thing. This is a much more nimble system than the MLO system we have. If we change any field or any question in MLO, it's $20,000. I mean, that's just, it's because it's all hard coded. This is more clicks than code. So we feel like we can do, if you all pass and change things, we will be in a position to handle it better under this new system than previously.
Ms. Sterling, on part of the process, I'm sure a lot of these licenses require a criminal background check. And when I get, as an insurance agent, when I go to get appointed with a new insurance company, they do a criminal background check on me. And for some reason, I've had this come up a couple times this year where it's just taken a couple months to get those back. Are y'all seeing that problem, or do you have a different system to go through, or?
We all go through GCIC, but they changed how we do the fingerprinting and the background checks for the criminal records. And I may not be the best friend. Wanda, can you come here, because I don't understand this as much as you do. Y'all met Wanda earlier. She's the deputy.
We had her up here twice.
And she's a hell of a lot smarter than me on this one, so go ahead.
So to explain the criminal background checks, we go through CGIS, and they changed their process. What they decided to do was that first you have to have an application on file. So even though if you go to get your fingerprints done, if you haven't sent us an application, they're not going to accept you. So they put you in a system. You have to be in a system. We have to receive your application. Then we can say, yes, it's okay, you can take their fingerprints. Then they go and get their fingerprints done. Then they send us the results, and we have to go back out and get it. So that's been a change in the process with criminal background checks. A second thing that's very important about the background checks is the fact that when they go and get it, not only did they change the process, now they've changed who they use. They were using Cogent, they've changed over to a new provider. So this new provider caused a backlog. We had people that had registered under Cogent through them, that they were no longer valid, and they had to go and re-register. So that caused a delay in processing of the fingerprints as well. And that just occurred maybe about 3 or 4 months ago. So that caused a delay in there. And then we just found out, this affects our RNs. We have a lot of international RNs. The new provider that they selected doesn't have anything set up for internationals. So now we're battling with them about international and how we get their fingerprints done. So it's been a challenge to adhere to these rules and regulations, but we're doing the best that we can. I mean, we've got people that are staffed that their main priority is the first thing they do is go out there and check backgrounds, approve as many people as they can, and get them pull those background checks off of there.
So to answer your question, it's taking longer.
I mean, yeah, I've noticed that in my industry. So, Wanda, before you leave,
Don't go away.
if,
Don't run away.
so if things were, I mean, I'm wanting to push for, 30-day shot clocks on this stuff. If it takes longer than 30 days to get a background check, obviously that's a problem. Under normal times, or maybe when this new vendor gets their, works through the backlog, can you normally get a background check within 30 days, or?
And that is a good question, actually, because they have their own guidelines. CGIS, they have their own timelines. So even though we're ready and we're ready to get their fingerprints, they have their own delay. They're like, oh, it can be 30 days before they can come in and even get their fingerprints done. And then once they get their fingerprints done, how long does it take to get it back? So
And that's outside of our
that's
purview,
outside of
unfortunately.
our, what
Okay.
we can do. We can only do, once we get the results back, then we can process.
All right.
So you see, there's many things that are outside of our ability to even. We get blamed for everything, but it's not our thing to do, unfortunately.
You said international a second ago. Your slide said states. It didn't have anything to do with international. We talking about two different things?
What slide?
When we were talking about people coming into the state for licensure.
There's out of state and there's international, two separate things. So the international ones, they can't even handle right now, which is a large part, especially of our nursing side, where people are registered in Europe or Africa or Asia, and they come here, and they don't even have a way to handle those people right now.
And I'm hearing it from constituents that are MD physicians, that maybe they were from
Grenada?
Ukraine or whatever, or
A lot of our scientists, a lot of our doctors.
that
A lot
can't
of our
practice
nurses,
medicine here and apparently
engineers.
just about can't get licensed to practice. That's what I've been told.
Well, I mean, I can see that balance. You want to make sure that they're actually legitimate at what they do, but if they're,
But
But
that's a
getting
composite
fingerprints should
medical
not be
board.
that.
Yeah, fingerprints is binary. You have them, you don't,
Don't.
you know? And that's the one we're talking about in this particular case. And obviously, there's our board, and there's the composite medical board for the medical side, and I know they have a 5 or 6 month backlog of getting people done, especially the international side, which is taking longer. Again, not our purview, but that's what's happening.
So the issue is the processing of the fingerprints?
Hell, I don't know. I don't know what's, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a fingerprint.
Right.
It is a single thing that they have, and they can use AI. I mean, it shouldn't be 30 days. I don't know why the vendor's taking as long as they are.
And who chooses that vendor?
CGIS.
Okay.
This, what's that? The GBI does.
GBI. And didn't we a few years ago, and I think we expanded background checks maybe with
Nurses.
with,
They
with long-term care facilities? Did we do something?
Yeah,
Long-term
years
care
ago?
was a new one. and-
Nurse
yeah.
aides,
Mhm.
CNAs have to,
But I remember at that time, I think I was in the House, maybe we did that, but I thought there was an issue as well about access to getting fingerprints in rural Georgia in certain places. Didn't we address that with some funding to put new vendors in places? Is there any update on that?
Y'all may have addressed it. It doesn't mean it actually occurred.
actually happened.
I mean, it occurred to a degree, but they get the fingerprints. This is the processing. It's two separate
Right.
events. I mean, the people go roll their fingers. It just sucks. I mean, they're slow. I'm sure we're saving taxpayer money, but it's taking a lot of time and it's slowing the process down. And we're not getting people licensed, and getting them to work.
So access to going and get your fingerprint done is not the issue. You're saying is then the processing of it, right? Getting the results
Right.
back.
So look at this in two parts.
A lot of money.
Look at this in two parts. So yes, you did provide funding, and they do have more places. You can go get your fingerprints done at FedEx, you can get it
That's
done
right.
at the grocery store, wherever the vendors happen to be at. But there's two parts of this. They also made it where now, in the past, you could just go up and say, hey, I'm gonna be applying for a license, I need to go ahead and get my fingerprints done. that's perfect. They were allowing that. But then they changed the process. So now you have to mail me an application. I have to have you in my system before you can even go and say, hey, I want to get my fingerprints done. So you've already started the process with us. Our clock has already started ticking, and yet you still haven't been approved to get your fingerprints done. That was a change that was, they were trying to save Georgians or customers money by saying, because once they get their fingerprints done, it has to be pulled within so many days or it's invalid. So they didn't want people to keep having to come back and get their fingerprints done. To me, if I'm going to get my fingerprints done, I'm going to mail my application in pretty quick. But some people weren't. And so they would get their fingerprints done and then wait a month, month and a half, send in their application. And by that time, those fingerprint results were no longer valid. They don't maintain them for us to pull. So then they changed the law to make them have to mail us an application. So our clock starts, but theirs doesn't.
Who changed the law? Which was that?
That was done through the
federal law.
federal.
Okay.
Federal, it's the feds who did that.
It's Larry Walker. That was your bill. See, I added more facilities. You made it more complicated.
No, thanks, Biden. No, it was the feds who did that.
So it sounds like everything you're saying is a national issue then on these.
And it is. When we go to the National Association of Secretary of State, everybody's dealing with this now. It was one of those well-intentioned things, but it's just had a really bad outcome, unfortunately. Don't get any ideas.
I'm gonna recognize Representative Bentley for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. So what can you tell me, Gable, for those that are in the funeral industry, these young students getting ready to graduate from Gupton Jones or Ogeechee Technical College or Columbus Technical College, ready to make their mark into the death care industry? What can we say to them as it relates to this long time process of getting their fingerprints done?
I mean, essentially, they're dealing with the same thing as everybody else does. At least they're in a recession-resistant industry, so there's always going to be funerals. But they have the same situation that every other applicant has. Once they get the application into us, then they can get the fingerprints done. But it's a federal issue that we are just sort of swimming through. We can't change anything on it. It is what it is for us, unless you can talk to our good representatives and senators to maybe push for a change. But this is administrative. This isn't a legal thing. This is an administrative situation. And the funeral side isn't as bad of a problem as it is for most of the other industries that we have, because they're focusing on a couple of things. So it should be all right for them.
Very good. That's good to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Did you have any more you wanted to tell us about?
Basically, we have a very hardworking staff. We've got a very hardworking intake and call center, and the $8.5 million we appreciate. If we could get some more, we could get some more bodies in here. We could probably process stuff faster. I mean, it's just a throughput issue, and especially right now when it kind of trickles down to other things. We're talking about affordable housing. We don't have enough contractors in this state. We need more bodies to go for contracting. We don't have enough nurses in the state. We need more bodies to process the nurses. In a competitive way, we need to be the easiest state to license in. This system will end up helping with that, but in the meantime, we still need bodies. And that's going to be the biggest thing to try to push these things through, because it affects every other thing that y'all have to deal with. Nursing shortages, healthcare shortages, housing shortages, all those things flow through our office, and we need more bodies. That's the one thing I would leave you with. And listen, I've been a conservative Republican. I hate spending money, but you have to spend money in the right places to make the systems go. We want this stuff. The governing side of this isn't easy, and it's about choices. So we need to make a decision that we can have, and our office produces enough money. It does, to have this done. So anything y'all can do on the funding side, and once we get the new system in, we can probably start pairing our intake people to be analysts. But we have a meantime situation of about a year or so. So anything y'all can do in the meantime, we would truly appreciate.
I appreciate what you all are doing, and I agree that, I mean, I would be supportive of additional resources for your increase in volume that you're dealing with, and also this transition to the more efficient system. I do think there's other systemic problems with, I mean, it doesn't sound like the fingerprint issue is something we can really easily address, but when you have to have 3,000 hours of experience to be a massage therapist, or you have to have 8 or 10 year, I mean, 4-year degree, and then 4 or 5 years of field experience to be a surveyor, or, I mean, I think there are things that I hope this committee will look at that, and talk to those specific industries, and I'm not picking on those two, but see if this stuff's reasonable. And as a young person, why would you want to go into a field where it's going to take you that long to be able to really earn, the maximum earnings for what you're trying to do while you're kind of an apprentice or whatever. I hope we'll identify some things we can do to lessen the barriers to work. And I think that's the goal of the Georgia Works Commission also.
Yes, sir.
So I hope we are going to be able to. But as you peel back the onion, you've seen today with the testimony and discussion, it's complicated.
I mean, the Secretary Raffensperger is basically, like you, Senator Walker, wants to get people working faster. And you're right. It makes no sense that to cut hair, I need 2,000 hours of work, but to be in the back of an ambulance as an EMT, I need 134 hours. That doesn't make any sense. So I appreciate the Senate looking at these items and your leadership on this front.
All right, thank you. Anything else from the committee? All right, when is our next meeting, Kyla? All right, September 27th at 10 a.m. We're gonna do it at the Capitol, room 450. I'll get an agenda out within the next week for that. And my intention is to have sort of certain topics at these future meetings. One will be the construction trades, one will be a healthcare centric meeting. And then we were gonna add in some, kind of the funding issue. We'll touch on that, and some structural issues that may be helpful. But I appreciate everybody's attendance today, appreciate the presenters and those that have joined us online. Thank you. And we've got a opportunity here to help Georgians, and I hope we can get some good recommendations out of this. So, I have been getting a few texts from Chairman Anavartardi, and I don't think he has any questions, but thank you for him being with us on the live stream. So, everybody, safe travels, have a great afternoon, and the meeting's adjourned.